Hi, everybody. This is Donnie Winshaw from Ohio Wine Producers again. This is a number 5, I believe, of our video series on things you need to consider before you open your winery and as you're progressing through it. The first year or 2 or 3 even. What we're talking about today is writing a business plan. The best wine in the world can be made, but if you don't have a plan as to how to sell it, you will surely lose your investment and be incredibly disappointed that this dream you've had for so long is coming to an end. So, some things to think about as you're getting this business plan first in your head with a little bit of background research and then eventually on paper. So you need to think about what's going on in the larger world. This is a 30,000-foot view of what is going on in the American and state and maybe even international wine communities. So what's going on in terms of trends? What kinds of wine are people drinking? How much wine are the small and medium wineries producing? How are they selling it via distribution? There's an awful lot going on, especially in California and in the Northwest, with consolidation, with larger wineries buying up smaller ones. There's certainly technological advances. I mean, just AI and from a marketing perspective, but also the things going on in the cellar and in the vineyard are changing the way we do our business. And beyond just our business, there are all these cultural and societal trends going out there, big swinging things. Maybe not so much as the women's liberation or bra burning from the 80s, but there are certainly big demographic changes in age groups and in their consumption patterns. There's also, unfortunately for a lot of us, the reemergence of a neo-prohibition trend that I first evidenced back in the 80s, and we thought for sure it was going away, but it really hasn't. There are people out there who believe that wine is a sinful beverage, that alcohol is sinful. The World Health Organization in January of 23 actually identified alcohol, not just wine, but alcohol generally, as a class 1 carcinogen, right up there with radiation poisoning and cigarette smoking. So we need to think about what's going on beyond just the fact that we enjoy some wine with the people out there who perhaps don't share our views. There are also some economic trends. We'll talk a little bit about the availability of share of wallet. Wine is not generally considered a necessity. It is a want, not a need. So we need to think about how we fit into that want category and make it successful for our operation. And then there's regulations. We are one of the most regulated industries of all in the country. We have environmental regulations. We have issues with water disposal. We have issues with chemical usage and what we're allowed to do. We have record keeping of all kinds with many, many different agencies. TTB, which is the basic agency that issues your first permit at the federal government, initially just gives you the permit or not. They have restrictions and requirements in terms of the kinds of things, the labels you can put on your wine, what you can put in the bottle, and how you can identify that. They come out and they inspect what you're doing, and so your record keeping is critical, and your reporting needs to be on time. Otherwise, you're going to be in significant violation, and they will come in and they will shut you down. The state, just as much as the feds, they issue a variety of permits. First of all, you have to have a production permit, but beyond that, if you're going to take your wine off premises, there are all kinds of temporary permits that you're going to need for special events. We'll talk a lot about those in a future webinar. And they too inspect not only the Department of Agriculture, but liquor control and EPA and all kinds of local health departments. There's lots and lots and lots of things that you'll have to comply with in order to be able to continue to sell your wine. And there are legal limitations. I mean, there's a shipment of wines. You can't just nilly-willy put some wine in the back of your pick-em-up truck and deliver it to your neighbor. You have to have the right permits. You can't ship wine across state lines unless you have the right permits. If you have certain production levels, there are limitations in what you can and cannot do to those tourists that come through your door. And certainly there are taxes. We are taxed to the nth degree. We pay state taxes and federal taxes and excise taxes. We all pay property taxes. We pay school taxes. We certainly pay withholding taxes, and there's just a myriad of them. So you'll need to understand what your responsibilities are and begin to develop plans and programs to meet those responsibilities and requirements that the governmental entities have for us. You also have to think about a competitive analysis. And when I say competitive, I don't just mean the wineries in your immediate area or the barefoot that's on the grocery store shelf. There are lots of opportunities for competition in this business. So certainly the other wineries and the other winemakers, locally and nationally, are part of those with whom you have for whom you have to have an understanding. And then there are certainly the other craft beverages. There are ciders and there are beers and there are distilled beverages and there are a lot of other kinds of things out there that are not alcohol. Certainly the White Claws have been a pain in most people's derriere. But the RTDs, the alcohol ready to drink in a can, are out there. So that is all part of what we need to look at as you develop a business plan. And beyond just beverages like Coca-Cola and Pepsi and White Claw, your other competition is for a share of wallet. Wine is as I said, is a want, not a need. So if someone wants to go to the movie theater ticket, to go to the movie theater, is there enough money after he or she buys that ticket after they've paid the rent and the groceries and taken care of the demands of their kids' soccer teams? So your competition is for a share of wallet, and you need to think and be valuable enough so folks are willing to invest part of that wallet investment in you. And then, of course, there's those anti-alcohol activists that I talked to you about initially. Actually, 26% of the Z's, those kids under 25, may not be anti-alcohol activists, but 26% of them don't drink any alcohol at all. So how are they going to affect you? And then how are all of these myriad of forces going to compete with you? Are your target customers going to be similar to the White Claw consumer? Are they going to be different? How and why? Identify all these variety of customer styles and demands and needs and see where you fit into that mix. And then I would recommend very strongly that you do a really careful look around your immediate area and look for the 3 most successful businesses that you can find. And then in each case, try to identify the 3 specific reasons they are so successful. Your question is, are you going to emulate them? Are you going to take their idea and twist it and morph it a little bit so it meets your needs and vision a little more carefully? You have to be, though, careful. You don't want to be the same as everybody else. I'm a big fan of a guy named Roger Brooks, and he always talks, he's a marketer, and he always talks about taking 100 words that describe your business, your winery, your farm, and write them all down and then eliminate every single one of them that could be used to describe your neighbors. You'll end up with a handful of unique things that are you, that make you different. And that will be your competitive advantage. This is going to take some time and some thought and some, putting some things on paper and then coming back to them again later. But you really need to identify why someone is going to spend their money, their hard-earned money, with you versus one of those competitors, whomever those competitors might be. And then you're going to have to think about a business plan, a hard business plan on paper, clearly thought out, clearly researched for the bank. Unless you have someone there that is going to lend you a bunch of money and not have you sign any documentation to pay it back, or you inherit a bunch of money from some great unknown uncle that lives across the country that didn't have any other relatives, you're probably going to have to provide you're gonna have to make some agreements with the bank to get the cash flow, the revenue that you need. So for the banks, and banks are a little skeptical sometimes of the wine business, depending on where you are. If your winery is going to be an area where there are lots of other wineries, it might be a little easier. But if you're going to be the only winery, or maybe the second winery in your county, or maybe the second winery after one failed in your county, you're going to have to be very careful with the presentation you make to the bank. What kinds of wine do you want to sell? How much do you want to produce? How much will you produce the first year, the second year, the fifth year? The Research Center at Ohio State has collaborated with a guy named Chris Stamp from the Finger Lakes, who has an amazing analysis in this new book that has been released in 2023. And if anybody is interested in a copy, we'll work to get you a copy of it. It's about $50 from the university, but it is very, very worthwhile. Chris lays out a blow by blow, year by year, actually month by month, marketing plan and business plan that is absolutely a gold mine. Then you have to decide how are you going to sell your wine. We're going to talk a lot about this in another video where we talk about tasting room and distributors. But I'm going to say to you at the beginning, especially, at least 95% of your wine needs to be sold at your tasting room. So you have to think a lot about the tasting room, how it will be accommodating guests, how it will be appealing, how you're going to hire the right staff. All of this has to be clearly defined in this summary that you're going to provide to the bank. And then after a year or two, maybe by the 5th year, you will have sold all of the wine or nearly all of the wines you can produce. You need to think about moving beyond the boundaries of just your tasting room or the winery premises itself. So we always recommend that you begin looking around at carryout shops in what we call a 50-mile radius, where you can call on Tuesday, deliver on Thursday, and still get most of your money. And I will highly recommend, I'm going to discourage, I guess, everyone to put aside even the thought of a distributor until you reach a threshold of about 30 to 50,000 gallons. You really need to sell most of your wine at the tasting room. And one of the videos coming on in a little bit will help you convince the bank that that's the way you need to go. And again, list for the bank. Why are you different? Why are you special? What are your keys to success? And be brutally honest. What are your risk factors? What are the things, the shortfalls that you can identify now, along with an explanation of how you intend to mitigate those? You have to have a clear set of biographies with skills and with history and business acumen for all of your management team. And then you need to figure how much money you're going to put on the table and then how much you're going to need to borrow. The bank, we're going to do, there's just another piece on how risk adverse lenders are. So you really need to have this honed down carefully. And then also for the bank, but also for your future success. As much as I hate sitting down with this SWOT analysis thing where you do the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, you really do need to do that and come up with a mission statement. It needs to be a phrase or two to identify first what business you're in, why you should be there, why you should exist, what services you will provide to your customers. Because remember, this winery is not designed to serve your needs until you serve your customers' needs, because that's the only way you're going to make money. And then you have to establish some values that are important to you. I mean, growing all your own grapes is important, or making the best wine you can out of your neighbor's grapes, or bringing in juice from another area, making the best wine. You have to identify in this mission statement what your values are in terms of your business. And then in those biographies I talked about, you need to let the lender know, and you need to understand for yourself, how business savvy are you? Have you been successful in other areas? The areas where you've had successes, do they have any application at all to the wine business? And have you had some failures? Jack Welch has always said that a great successful person always has one or two failures in their lives. But if you have those failures and they're very obvious, you need to make the bank and the people with whom you're going to be working understand how you address those failures and rose up over them. You need strengths, you need weaknesses, and a very important issue that I think you need to consider: where are you putting the winery? In real estate, it's location, location, location. I believe in the wine business, it's 45 minutes from a big city, 45 minutes from a big city, and 45 minutes from a population center. If you are more than that, people are not nearly as willing to drive out to an area unless there is a cluster of wineries in your region. So if there is a cluster, remember those folks are your competitors, but in some ways they can also be an asset, because they will bring groups of folks out to your winery to explore and enjoy. Typically, when there are clusters of wineries together, about 25% of the visitors to those wineries are loyalists. They go to their favorite winery and they stay there, and that's the only place they go. But about 75% of them float around. So if you can be within this 45-minute rule, destination rule, and have several wineries around you, you've got an opportunity for success that other wineries might, who are more isolated, not have. And then what physical, financial, and human resources do you bring? Are you a tinkerer? Can you fix something that is broken if the tractor has an issue or the pump fails? Do you have a little bit of electrical skills? Do you have a little bit of marketing skills? Do you have a little of ability to do some grunt work? I mean, can you hop into the septic system and get it unclogged if it happens on a Saturday afternoon when the whole place is filled with lots and lots of people? So you need to think about what things you can do. There's a really good PowerPoint that we're going to talk about later on about the kinds of oddball, handyman, jack of all trades you need to think about when you move into this wine business. And then what are your goals? Do you want to make $1 million? Do you want to be the Robert Mondavi of your region so you become a visionary? What are your personal goals? Do you want satisfaction? Do you want a quality of life? Do you want a lifestyle change? Do you want to bring your kids into the family? And then what kind of ownership structure do you plan to use? Absolutely, I would not recommend a sole proprietorship. That is fraught with all kinds of difficulties in terms of legalities and insurance and opportunities to lose your house in a failure situation. Partnerships are good as long as the instructions and the relationships are clear. I would never offer a 50-50% partnership to anybody. If you are opening the winery, you want to have at least 51% so you control the decision making. Even if you have 33%, your two partners can get, and you have 4 partners who own 10% each or whatever the numbers are, the partners can get together and outvote you. So make sure you have at least 51%. Lots of people are looking at LLCs. Lots of people are looking at S corporations. You need to figure out what works for you. Talk to an attorney, talk to an accountant to see what is best for your personal circumstances. And just important as developing a business plan is an exit plan. One of these days down the road, you may die. You may be too old to do this. You may unfortunately divorce your spouse and have this messy situation that you have to dispose of the business. You never know what happens down the road. I keep quoting Rob McMillan, but he said, hope is not a plan. So you need an exit plan. How are you going to get out of this if you have a dispute with your partners, if you have to deal with a death in the family, if a key man has to leave the operation for whatever reason? So make sure your exit plan is clearly thought out and clearly documented. So there are lots of licenses. In Ohio, the basic production permit is an A2. If you grow grapes, you will qualify for an A2F, which is a farm permit. When you get bigger, perhaps, and you want to serve alcohol and you want to serve beer, there's an A1A, which is a very expensive license. You need a B2A license in Ohio to sell to your neighboring carryout store. We'll talk about that in another video. And you need an S permit, an S1 in Ohio, to ship wine off the premises of your property. So you'll need to understand those. And again, we have a whole video on the various permits. So where are you getting your fruit? You're going to grow it? You're going to buy it? You're going to skip over the growing of fruit and the pressing of it and just buy juice? What about contracts? You need a long-term contract with a quality grower if you want to maintain a quality supply of fruit coming into your winery. Some years the grower will have lots of volume and he may want to sell you more than you can use that year. But in another year, he may have a bad frost or a freeze and lose most of his crops. So you need to develop a relationship with him, taking most of what he has when you have a contract and understanding when there's a short-term shortfall because of unforeseen circumstances. But if you're not going to grow your own grapes, you need to also, in that relationship, establish quality parameters. You need to visit the vineyard. You need to understand what he's doing in the vineyard, making sure that all of the chemical applications are appropriate, make sure that picking, the leaf pulling is there, the quality of fruit is growing, and that when it is picked, it is picked at the peak of ripeness at a time when you determine. And then you need to think about the building. It's sort of like moving into a house. When we moved into our house, I thought, what am I going to do with all of these cupboards? And 6 months later, they were all full. And I was thinking, I need some more cupboard space. So the same thing is going to happen with your building. Make sure you design the building for now, building all that you can afford, but also laying out the plumbing and the heating lines and all those things that will allow you to expand without undue expense. Do you know what equipment you need? We have a video coming that will talk a lot about the equipment that you need and places you can find the equipment at more reasonable prices. Do you have sources? And again, there's lots of sources out there. Talk to the other folks in the business. They will be helpful. Be sure is looking at fire codes. There's a big brouhaha that began in the summer of 2023 that continues to this day about fire codes and safety. There are some exceptions in some states for agricultural buildings, but fire and safety can never be exempted. So you need to be very careful. And certainly EPA, they are the bane of most folks' existence. So you're going to open a winery, you're going to grow your own grapes, but you have a huge capital investment, and that first wine won't be ready for 10 to 12 months. Do you have some staying power until your first vintage is ready after you've made all this investment? Do you understand the law regarding shiners? In some states, shiners, which is the definition of a shiner, or the explanation of a shiner, is a sealed bottle of wine with a cork that does not have a label on it. And in a lot of states, you can buy shiners and sell them in your winery, not in a state like Ohio. So be very, very careful with that. We had a winery in this state, came from another state. Shiners were allowed, built the winery, brought all the shiners in. Liquor control came in and made him dump all of the shiners and rebottle them. So be careful what you do. And think about tasting room design. We've got a really good program coming on tasting room layout and design, both for flow, for seating, for recommendations on how to help the tasting room itself sell. And you have adequate storage room. Are you going to grow? If you want one of those A1A licenses, you're going to have the ability to have 25,000 square feet of storage in order for you to get an A1A, so you can serve that beer and that wine if you so choose to. And are you going to grow some great reds and you're going to need to put them in the cellar for 2 or 3 years in barrels? Is there a place in your plan for that to be temperature controlled and to be out of the way so they won't be in your path all of the time, but also accessible enough so you can maintain control and quality? And you know how many employees you'll need. You need to think about it. We always say, and there'll be another video on staffing, but you need to hire smart and nice. 5% of the people who come through your door are going to be duds. Ignore them. 5% of the people who come to your door for a job are going to be great. Hire them immediately. But 90% hire on personality and teach wine. What are you going to need in the tasting room? What are you going to need in production? What kind of skills do your marketing and salespeople have? And frankly, in small wineries, you're probably going to have to do it all. Do you have, are you ready to do all of that? And then the next video will be about marketing. All that great wine, all that money that you got from the bank, all that pretty building, all those plans you've laid will go down the drain, literally, if you can't sell that great stuff that you're producing. So do you have a marketing plan in place? So we'll have lots more videos coming on lots of topics. We encourage you to look at them, and we appreciate the time you're spending with us to be successful in this business. It's an amazing business. You will love it. You will learn to love it. You'll make great, good friends. You'll travel around the world tasting wines. It'll be a great opportunity. But you need to be careful with what you're doing and plan judiciously. Thanks a lot.